I didn't expect the ocean to clap at the exact second the bell rang, but the tide hits the black rocks like a hand on a drum, and that's when I hear it, my door chime, thin as a mosquito but sharp enough to slice the quiet inside my beach cottage. I stand there with a dish towel in my hand and a cinnamon stain on my thumb, and through the glass I see two people I once would have run barefoot across hot asphalt to greet. Zaria, my daughter, and Kelvin, her husband, on my porch in the late gold of evening, faces shiny with effort and fear. 12 years is a long hallway to walk down. Their eyes look like they ran it. Before I even unlatch the door, a wild thought bolts through me. Someone must have told them about the house, told them about the money, told them I was no longer the Imani they turned off like a light. The knob clicks. Salt comes in first. "Ma," Zaria whispers. "Please, we need to talk," I say. I hold the word in my mouth a second, tasting it, like I do nutmeg before I grate. "Come in, then." Talking always did love a chair. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. If my voice is finding you, touch that like, subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. They step past me and the cottage inhales around them. I built this place myself, not with a hammer, but with every small choice after the big cut. The floors are pale oak, the windows tall and clean, and my kitchen smells like brown sugar and lemon zest. There's a used paperback on the arm of the blue sofa and a bowl of shells, whole, chipped, a broken star on the table. When Zaria clocked my old life, I was in a one-room place above a nail salon that smelled like polish and acetone. This is different. Dawn Ridge is different. Out my windows, the ocean is a living thing that keeps its word. Kelvin lingers at the big frame on the wall. Charcoal sketch, a woman's profile, the line of her jaw like a question answered. He used to look at people like that, measured, weighing. He checks my countertops, the hardware, the range hood. I don't miss a flicker of it. He always was a surveyor of other folks' homes, peering for weakness. Zaria's dress is wrinkled. Her hair is pinned up like she did it fast in a car mirror. I watch her eyes skate across my kitchen mixer, the stand mixer I once folded wish money toward in a jar labeled like a dream. I don't tell them to sit. They do it anyway. "You look well," Kelvin says, and makes the compliment sound like a suspicion. He's handsome in that tidy way that age is stiff. His shirt is ironed. His mouth is not. "Strong," Zaria adds. It's true and also not the point. "Must be the ocean," I say, or having no one lying to me before breakfast. The clock ticks. The gulls gossip on the roof, rude as aunties. I put my towel on the oven handle and open the fridge for the pitcher of water. When I set the glasses on the table, Kelvin flinches at the quality. Even that is data for him. "It's been years," Zaria says. 12, I answer, not cruel and not kind, which is the difference between moss on a rock and a new rock. "Imani," Kelvin says in that politician's tone he used even before he ran for the school board the first time. "I know old wounds." "You weren't there for the stitching," I say, and let it land. "Now, what made your car remember my road?" They tell me. I knew, of course. There's a way trouble clings to people like a smell they can't wash out. But I listen anyway because that's a habit I refuse to lose. Kelvin's development company, Tri-City Rise, fell like a rotten fence. Deals stretched like taffy until they snapped. A bad bet, a bad partner, a bad season. I've heard it before from other men with watched hands. The house, my daughter's house, stood on a mortgage I said was too tall when they signed it. The youngest, Maya, needed braces. The eldest, Eli, was suspended for a fight that wasn't a fight, but a bruise with a story. Zaria stopped working when childcare ate her check like a wolf. The city came for back taxes, which always come. And then, Kelvin clears his throat here, like it's a sermon line. The bank. I pour water. They don't touch it. "We wouldn't be here if you had any other door to knock." I hold his words in my palm and give them back. His jaw ticks. If we hadn't misjudged things. Zarya looks at her hands. She has my hands. Long fingers, strong thumbs. The nails are unpainted and bitten down. I kept thinking I'd call you, Ma, she says, and her voice holds a break like a hairline in a plate. But it became this thing. This rock. Every day it got heavier to lift. What do rocks do underwater? I ask. She blinks. Sink. You let a phone call turn into an anchor. I'm not doing this to be clever. I'm finally done letting other people translate me. I talk how I talk and let the truth do its work. There's a plate of cooling buns on the counter. Orange cardamom, my Wednesday batch for the cafe up the cliff. I decide to glaze them because something should receive sweetness today. The spoon makes its tiny tapping noises and the sugar ribbon slides. Who told you about the house? I ask without looking up. And the rest. Zarya's head comes up quick, but Kelvin beats her mouth to the air. Small towns talk. Dawnridge is not small. I drizzle. It's precise. There's a difference between small and attentive. A name slips out of Zarya anyway. Mrs. Adler. From the bank? Of course it was. Violet Adler has 2 superpowers. She keeps confidence like it pays a rent, and she vomits gossip when she's bored. I can see her now, leaning on the teller line as if it were a story's spine, whispering, "That pie lady?" she'd say. "You won't believe." I don't flinch. News always finds the person it wants to hurt. Zarya swallows. We're not here to take anything from you, Ma. We're here to ask Kelvin puts numbers on the table like chips. 120 would save the house, 80 would buy time, 50 would talk the bank into a softer boot. I watch the digits jump like fish and fall dead just as fast. It's money, Zarya says, voice small. It's just money. No, I say gently, and watch the words change her face. It's not just money. It's math I did with my whole life. I didn't win the lottery. I didn't rob a bank. I didn't find a chest under this cottage. I baked. And then something unbelievable happened because unbelievable things sometimes choose you when you work as if nobody's watching and everybody is. Before Dawnridge, I worked in a grocery bakery, frosting sheet cakes with congratulations spelled wrong. I saved. After the cut from my child, I saved thicker. Then the market closed, and I sold from a folding table on the sidewalk, lemon chess, coconut cream, pecan so dark it looked like stained wood. One afternoon, a woman with a wool coat and a clean bob ate my citrus tart standing up and asked for a dozen more for a fundraiser. She came back the next week and asked for 50. Turned out she could do more than chew. She wrote about food for a New York paper, wrote about me too. The blog post became a column. The column became a no-noise shout. People were ordering pies to fly across the country. Then the producer called. He had a name that tastes expensive. His show made bakers into somebody's favorite friend. "We want your story," he said. "We want your hands." I kept my story, I told him, but you can have the hands. The show aired. The orders doubled, then tripled. Every dollar had edges, but I learned to stack them so they didn't cut. A quiet investor, her name stitched into nothing and everything, bought me out of a lease that was choking me, and I bought this cottage as if my heart had wings. My lawyer emailed, and the subject line said, "Surprise in your favor." An aunt I barely knew, a woman with salt in her hair and a passport with tired edges, left me more than anyone leaves anyone like me. She left me a letter, too, in a slanting hand. "You will never again audition for love." After that, I learned the difference between privacy and hiding. I bought good pans. I put plates in the cabinet that talk to your palm. I started a Wednesday circle for women who know what silence costs. We drink tea. We stitch back the pieces. We tell the truth on purpose. I stand up straighter now, not to look bigger, but to feel my ribs give the right kind of ache. Kelvin breathes in to argue. I raise my hand, the way I did when Zarya was 4 and thought a sob could change physics. "I hear your ask," I say, "but asking is not the same as tending. You left our garden to weeds, and now you want flowers on a date. He leans forward. Family. Family, I say, is not the word you say when you need a truck. He blinks as if I slapped him. I didn't. I retired that reflex the day I walked out of my last apartment with 2 totes and a mixer and didn't look back. Zaria stares at the buns. One tear drops from her chin to her dress and makes a small moon. She used to cry with her whole face. Now she cries like adults do, quietly, like it's a leak she can patch. I was cruel to you, she says suddenly, as if she stood up inside herself. I was. I let him say things about you like you were a storm we had to board up against. I said things myself, things I can't even repeat without vomiting them up. And I made you small in front of my children because I was scared of being small in front of my husband. Kelvin flinches at that. Control shakes when you say it out loud. And you are here, I say, feeling the truth crackle like sugar on a brulee. Because being broke is teaching you to read. She nods. The gulls are quieter. The clock switches hours. Tell me something I don't know, I say. Zaria licks her lips. Maya, our youngest, has been writing letters to you on paper and hiding them in a shoebox. She saw your face on a clip that got sent around. An old classmate of mine shared the piece about your pies. Maya said, "That woman looks like me around the eyes." I told her it was a baker from the coast. She wrote anyway. She writes every week without expecting a reply. I never mailed them. My fingers go numb. If I press the counter too hard, the glaze will crack. How old, I ask. 8. Zaria swallows. She writes the way a child talks to a star. She tells you about spelling words and a girl who picks at her nose and how she wants a bike with purple handles. She says she dreams of a kitchen where the air tastes like oranges. That last part is a knife I let slide in because pain has been earned, too. There's a shoebox somewhere with my name on it, a name my granddaughter uses like a map, and the person who could have stamped the letters closed her mouth around the truth instead. I have survived a lot, but some news makes you feel like you will melt and still be solid. Where is the box? I ask. Closet. High shelf. Behind Kelvin's shoe, shine kit. She tries to smile, but it's a failure. He never looks behind his goods. He bristles. This is exactly about, I say. Everything is exactly about. I go to the sink and wash my hands because good news and bad news both stick to your skin. When I come back, I sit across from my daughter. Kelvin doesn't deserve my eyes yet. Zaria does. I can help the children, I say. If they want help from me, if their mother learns the difference between asking and expecting, if their father learns the difference between leadership and theater, Kelvin opens his mouth, shuts it, opens again. I watch his dignity try to take a posture. It looks like a man hitching his pants. Conditions? He asks. He says the word like it cost him a tooth. Not conditions, I say. Boundaries with concrete in them. I keep my voice soft. I will not raise it in this house. First, you take my number on your own phone again, Zaria. Use it as a phone, not a prop. Second, if I see a hint of contempt in my doorway, toward me, toward this home, toward how I breathe, you go back down my steps with your hands empty. Third, Kelvin, you will never again call me dramatic because my pain refuses your edits. I carry my own weather, now Kelvin shifts like there's a stone in his shoe. His jaw works, that clench he probably swears doesn't give him headaches. And the loan? Money is not a magic wand, I say. It can be a bridge. I like bridges. For a long second, there is nothing but the house listening to us. The ocean throws its shoulder against the shore. The light across my floor moves a fingernail. I will not fund your old life, I say, but I will invest in your new one if I see you building it with clean hands. I will set up a trust for the children that pays the school directly, and the orthodontist, he's probably already chewing the ends of his wire about. I will pay a late tax bill because the city has teeth, and I have no desire to watch it bite your children. I will not put $1 into a house that teaches you we can pass the bill for arrogance to family. You're going to a smaller place where the ceiling is honest. Kelvin breathes like a bull, readying himself. I hold my gaze steady and watch him decide which costume to wear. He picks remorse, but it doesn't fit clean. It never does on him. "Thank you," he says, as if the words itch. "That's generous." "It's careful," I say. "Generous is what you call careful when you want to skip your part." Zaria cries again, but with relief braided in. Even relief hurts when you haven't let your body do it in years. "Will you see the kids?" she asks. Not as a favor, as what you are." "What am I ask, because sometimes a person needs to hear themselves name a thing. "My mother," she says. "Their grandmother." The word settles in the room like a bird that may, if we sit very still, stay. I don't grab at it. I put out a little food. "Tomorrow," I say. "Bring them hungry at 11. No Kelvin," he starts. "Imani." "You and I built a reality where my absence was a virtue," I say. "You don't get to come on the first day of a truth you didn't want. You'll use the hours to find a smaller place with a window that opens. I will come see it before you sign." His jaw ticks again, the way it did when a councilwoman told him his last plan read like a brochure. Control is a habit as sticky as caramel. He looks at Zaria and sees that the part of her that used to mimic him has leaned away. That's a new hunger I can respect. "You're not punishing me," he says, and tries to say it like a fact. "I don't do punishment," I say. "I do natural consequences. That's different." The evening sifts finer. I make them each a bun and hand them in a napkin, not a plate. Food eaten from a napkin humbles a person. They bite. I watch Kelvin's mouth fight the urge to confess that it's the best thing he's tasted in months. I let him have his pride. Even pride deserves to chew. They leave with the buns and a list. I stand at the window and watch the old sedan crawl down my little road. Zaria looks back once and lifts her hand. It's a small wave, an almost wave. Almosts are seeds if you put them in dirt. When the house is quiet again, I sit with my tea and an ache that still knows my name. Revenge isn't always grand. Sometimes it's a clean room and a locked door. Sometimes it's a woman refusing to argue with a memory that wants to pretend it is a fact. I could end the story here, cut to credits with the ocean doing its endless work. But that wouldn't be true. Endings are rarely a single line. They're a braid. We go on. The next morning, the sky is white like paper. I set out plates, real ones. I lay a cloth, blue and crisp. And then she is in my doorway. She is 8, and she has my eyes. She wears a shirt with a strawberry that has lost 2 of its sequins, and her hair is in puffs clipped with barrettes that mean business. She smells like outside and crayons and a brother's laughter. "Hello," she says, and her voice is steady. "I'm Maya. I write letters." My bones give a creak like a field gate in spring. Do you now? We must be related. She steps in and looks everywhere at once. Children always bless a place with their eyes. Eli lopes in after, too long for his age, shoulders confused about themselves. He nods at me like boys do when they want to be kind and cool at the same time. Zaria hovers, unsure where to stand. I point with my chin to a chair. I will not braid resentment into this morning. She sits. She is smaller than I remember and taller in the right places. She smells like drugstore lotion in a car that needs air in one tire. I put a warm plate in front of Maya. She picks up a bun and turns it in her hand like a planet. "What's that smell?" she asks. "Oranges," I say, "and a spice from a far place." "Cardamom," Eli says, surprising us both. Zaria looks at him. "How do you—" He shrugs. "I follow chefs online. It calms me." "You'll like my pantry," I say, like I'm offering a boy a map. "There are jars that hum when you open them. He tries to hide a smile and fails. I decide I will buy him a knife when he turns 16, a real one, and teach him how a blade answers to a steady hand. While they eat, I ask Maya if she would like a drawer. She looks confused as a cat. "For your letters," I say. "I want them near me." She brightens like somebody turned up a dimmer. "Yes, please." "And for you, Eli," I say, "a shelf. For cookbooks, ones that tell the truth without shouting." He nods. His shoulders drop a fraction. The boy is an exhale waiting for permission. We walk to the beach after. The wind is frisky and the foam plays tag. Maya runs in circles, and Eli walks at my pace like he's practicing being a person who doesn't have to watch every corner of a room. Zaria catches up, and for a while we don't talk because the ocean is talking enough. "I was bad to you," she says suddenly. The wind takes her words and rolls them back to me like a ball I can choose to catch. I'm trying to be good now. Not just for what you can do. For what we lost and can't get back, I stop. The gulls know to let us have this spot. "You don't have to be good," I say. "You have to be honest and kind, and sometimes those are the same, and sometimes they argue." I look her full in the face, the way mothers do when daughters finally let them. "You will go to counseling alone. Kelvin will go too if he wants a chair in the new room, but your seat does not depend on his." She nods, and the nod feels like the first time she learned to keep her balance on a bike with no one's hand on the seat. "I don't want your money," she says. "I want your time." Time is money's older sister, I say with a smile. She's the one who teaches it manners. Maya shrieks at a wave pretending it can catch her, and then delivers a shell into my palm like she brought me a crown. The shell is imperfect, which means it's perfect. I put it in my pocket where it will poke my thigh all day and make me laugh at odd moments. In the weeks after, my plan holds. Kelvin finds a rental with honest walls and a kitchen that lights up when someone claps because the old switch is moody. He resents me in the way men resent the women they didn't want to need. I don't water that resentment. He shows up at my door once uninvited, and I show him my boundary the way a woman shows a photo of her grandchild. Proud, calm, not up for debate. He leaves. He learns. I meet my lawyer, and we draft the trust so clean even a bad judge would nod. The school fees go out like good seeds. The braces get paid, and the orthodontist stops sighing. Eli and I cook on Tuesdays. He chops onions and tells me he wants to stage in a kitchen in the city. I tell him stage is a French word that means you learn how to burn your ego before your sauce. He grins and tries to flip an egg with too much wrist, and then with enough patience. Maya and I write letters to each other we actually mail, with stamps that taste like glue. When she hands me the shoebox that once lived behind Kelvin's shine kit, I read every letter at my kitchen table with a bowl of cherries beside me. She wrote about her teacher who wore a sweater with cats on it and the day she realized she liked storms better than sunny days. She asked me if I believe in heaven, and I wrote back that I believe in kitchens and forgiveness, and sometimes those are the same. Zaria and I walk on the beach and sort words like buttons. We have a jar for what we say today and a jar for what we will say later when our mouths are bigger from telling the truth. Some days we say nothing and stand inside the same view. Healing is not a recipe. It is a practice. The ocean teaches this as if it invented repetition. One Saturday, the cafe owner asks if I'll do a reading from the little book the producer nudged me to make, recipes with essays braided in. I stand at a mic that smells like other people's breath, and I read the bit about choosing your table. The room is mostly women and one boy who looks like he's trying to grow into his shoulders without losing his laugh. Zaria sits in the back between Eli and Maya, and Kelvin stands at the door like a man checking a room for exits. When I read the line that says, "Never audition for love," Kelvin's eyes find the floor. I don't read it for him. I read it for the woman with her coat still on in case she has to leave fast to cry and come back. After, I sign a stack of books and write names carefully because names deserve it. When I look up, Maya is there with a felt pen and a grin like sun through blinds. "Will you sign mine to Maya who writes letters?" she asks. I will sign it to Maya who finishes what she starts, I say, and her grin gets bigger because even children know the power of a rename. There is no single scene where Kelvin becomes a saint. That is not how men like him move. But there is the day he says thank you, without the itch in it, because the landlord agreed to fix the window without a fight, and he realizes the world does not exist only to obstruct him. There is the day he picks up his son from the stage kitchen and doesn't ask why the boy's fingers smell like garlic. He asks if the boy learned something that doesn't live on YouTube. There is the day he stands in my doorway to drop off Maya's science project, a volcano that leaks glitter, and says, Imani, I won't apologize for everything, because apologies are cheap, but I will do different, because different is expensive. I look at him like a teacher who has seen every trick and still wants the child to pass. We'll see, I say, different pays in installments. You might be waiting for a spectacular revenge, a court scene, a headline, a man's ruin televised, but here is my revenge, and I offer it to anyone who comes to my door in a kind of pain that thinks it's alone. I did not let the grudge write me. I wrote me. I chose a life that fits. I made rooms where my grandchild's letters live within reach of the wooden spoons and the measuring cups. I gave money a job, and it did not become my boss. I answered the bell on my door without letting my body forget all the other nights it did not ring. I forgave the part of me that waited and did not get the call. I forgave the part that invented calls and answered them out loud, and I did not let regret tell me I owed it rent. Some evenings, after the dough starts its slow rise, I stand on my deck and breathe with the tide. On those nights, the cottage holds the day's heat like a secret, and the sky is a bruise that refuses to be ugly. The light turns the edge of everything into a small fire. From here, the town looks like a pocket universe wrapping itself up for bed. I think of other women at other tables making the same decisions in different kitchens. I think of the way we survive each other. We build our own coastlines, even if we live inland. Last week, Maya came home with a school assignment. Bring in a story from your family that makes you strong. She looked at me across the kitchen island with eyes that dared me to say, we don't have one. I laughed, and we wrote 3. Then picked the one where a woman built a life like a good pie crust. Cold butter, light hands, no rush. Eli filmed her reading it on his phone. Zaria sat on the stoop and cried very quietly, then laughed at herself and cried out loud. Kelvin hammered a nail to hang a frame I didn't ask him to hang, and it was level. A tide chart sits on my fridge. It tells me when the water will reach for the rocks and when it will draw its skirts away. I use it to time my bakes sometimes, not because water knows pastry, but because rhythm knows rhythm. There's a comfort in seeing the world keep its schedule even when people don't. There is a comfort in letting certain doors stay closed. And there is a satisfaction, call it revenge if you must, I call it right-sizing, in watching the story you were handed kneel under the weight of the story you made. You're listening to me because you want a clean ending. So here it is. Zaria pays the rent at the smaller place on time because she doesn't have to keep a big house on the books to feel big in the world. Kelvin builds a company that makes less money and more sense. Eli learns to salt water like a whisper. He moves to a kitchen in the city and calls me on Tuesdays to ask about lemons. Maya writes a book of letters bound with purple yarn. She keeps a drawer at my house and a toothbrush. She can find the vanilla without asking. As for me, I keep my Wednesday circle. Women sit in my living room and talk about weather and men and money and the ways they are not the same. We drink tea with orange peels in it and sometimes gin. We write each other prescriptions that begin with eat and sleep and say it. We donate to the shelter that keeps a spare bed for a woman whose courage is bigger than her suitcase. We teach our hands to make and to refuse with equal tenderness. Some nights the bell rings, and it is a stranger wanting directions. Some nights it is a neighbor with a pie dish to return and a story to tell. And once, months from that first evening, it is Zaria, alone, with a shoebox that doesn't need to hide anymore. We sit and read those letters out loud. We cry where we have to and laugh where we can. We put the whole box on a shelf between the flour and the sugar. The next morning, we bake a cake I haven't made since she was a girl, the chocolate one that sinks a little in the middle because it is honest, and we carry it across town to a woman moving into a first apartment after a last marriage. We hand her the cake as if we can hand her a future. She takes it as if she can. The ocean claps. The tide hits its drum. We go home. You've been with me through every rise and every quiet fall. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, where we make room for courage and endings that tell the truth. If the story sat with you, like the ocean sits with the shore, like the smell of oranges stays on your sweater, tap like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too. A week after we ate buns with our hands and rules on the table, I found out how small forgiveness can start. It was a Thursday, the kind where the sky can't decide if it wants to be silver or blue. I was measuring flour, scoop, level, no pack, and the doorbell hummed. When I wiped my palms and opened it, there stood a girl with a backpack that had one strap chewed. Her hair was a storm the comb had given up on, and her socks did not match in a way that made sense. "I'm Maya," she said like an oath. "I need to know if cinnamon sticks taste like pencils." "Only if you chew them the way you chew pencils," I said. "Come in." She walked straight to the counter and put both hands on it like she was claiming land. I took down the jar and let her smell the sticks. She closed her eyes and breathed like a small animal at a burrow mouth. "It smells like heat," she said. "It does," I said. "And wood," she added, "and the inside of a library." "That too," I said. We made cookies. Not the kind that spread into disappointment, the kind that hold their edge and let the middle stay soft. She cracked eggs with a determination that told me she will not always be kind, but she will be fair. She asked if the mixer was loud because it needed to shout to be heard. I told her sometimes machines bark to keep other sounds away. I told her sometimes people do too. By the time the cookies slid onto the rack, the kitchen smelled like safety. She licked the whisk and told me about a girl in her class who insists on being the line leader and will cry if she cannot. "She is made of boss," Maya said, and I almost dropped the tray from laughing. Zaria came by later to collect her children and found me and her daughter on the floor with markers, drawing a map of a place that doesn't exist yet. We named the streets after spices. We put a library on Cardamom Corner and a school on Vanilla Lane and a shelter with a bright door on Ginger Street. We put a bakery in the middle and colored the sign too dark and decided to start again. We did not throw the first map away. We folded it and put it in the drawer next to the letters. "I can't stay long," Zaria said, holding her keys like they had weight. "Kelvin's meeting a man about a place with better heat." "How is his heat?" I asked. "Still learning not to call everything a winter," she said, and I nodded, because I have been a human long enough to know the difference between seasons and moods. We began a new rhythm without announcing it. Tuesday evenings were Eli's. He arrived smelling like bus air and cumin. He stood in my kitchen like a boy trying on a suit. The first night he cut himself because he looked away while he sliced. I had the bandage box out before his blood was bored. I showed him how onions need confidence. I showed him how to hold a knife like a handshake. He told me about a chef online who swears in at least 2 languages and cries when he talks about garlic. We argued about salt until we agreed we weren't arguing at all. We were talking about fear. "People fear the salt because it is honest," I said. "They fear what lifts up the truth of a thing." He nodded like a man who understands more than he knows how to say. He took out his phone to film my hands. I told him to film his. The only way to learn your hands is to watch them work when you are not watching them. On Wednesdays, my circle gathered. We had grown from 4 to 9, which is almost a chorus. The new faces found us by accident and by whispers. A woman named Tilda came because she saw us laughing through the window and thought it was a class. We told her it is. We taught her how to sit in a chair without apologizing to it. We packed her a bag with a secondhand kettle and a clean mug and a jar of tea that smelled like oranges because she was moving to a studio with one plug that sparked like a mean idea. When a thing sparks wrong, I told her, you don't crouch down and beg it. You cut the power and call a friend. Be your own friend. Call us if you forget. We put money in a tin on the shelf, labeled yes. We did not label any other tin. We do not keep a no tin here. Life supplies those at wholesale. On Thursdays, I took the letters from the drawer and wrote back to the girl who sleeps under a roof I did not pay for. I told her stories about a woman who once thought the only way to be loved was to be smaller than her own shadow. I told her about the time her mother stuck 5 candles in a cake because we were too broke to put 10 and told me 5 was halfway to wishes. I told her how long it can take to grow a backbone and how it is never a shame to grow one at 40. I told her God might be tired of being asked about everything, so we could give God a break and ask the ocean sometimes or ask a tree. Fridays, I went to the farmer's market not to sell but to stand. I bought radishes I did not need because a woman with rough hands needed to count out bills and smile. I bought an older man's honey because his wife had died in spring and the bees had stayed anyway, which felt like a sermon with no preacher. Mr. Coe, who sells apples and opinions, asked me if I got bored now that I didn't have to make pie for a living. No, I said. Now I make it for a life. He nodded because he is a man who knows the worth of a different preposition. On a Monday that carried too much noise for its size, Kelvin called. I let the phone ring once more than I usually would. Imani, he said, like the name might break a tooth. The landlord backed out. We're stuck. Where are you now? I asked. In the parking lot at Pine View, he said, naming an old building that pretends to be a complex. Zaria's crying. The kids are quiet. I don't like it when they're quiet. Silence isn't always a threat, I said. Sometimes it's a tool. I told him to drive to the Little Harbor apartments, the ugly brick ones with honest plumbing and windows that let in actual air. Ask for Mrs. Connolly, I said. Tell her I sent you. Tell her you will not pay late and you do not play music after 10. Tell her your children will not put holes in walls, and if they do, you will patch them before God sees. He bristled. What does God? Everything, I said, and nothing. Go that afternoon because the world loves drama even in the small hours. The bank called me too. Not my bank. The other bank, the one that always knew too much. Ms. Imani, the voice said, and I could hear the acrylic nails on the desk. This is Violet from First Peninsula. We spoke before about the paperwork for... We didn't speak, I said. We existed in the same rumor. She gave a laugh that wanted to be a cough. I just wanted to extend congratulations, again, on the... You wanted to know if I'm a safe person to mention in lobbies, I said, not unkind. You wanted to know if the pie lady is still a lady and not a headline. Silence on the line. I took pity. I am boring in all the ways that matter, I said. Tell your friends. After that, my piece got a little skin on it. People spoke my name without a wince. They waved in the market instead of pretending their hands were busy. They asked me for recipes that were really requests for permission to start again. I gave both freely. One Saturday, Zaria and I went through a closet. That might sound small, but it is a kind of surgery if you do it right. We pulled out the dress she wore the week she stopped calling me. It is green and cheap, and I can see the thread tension from here. Keep, she said. No, I said. Not because it is ugly. Because it is a uniform for a woman you are not. We held the dress between us like a question. We folded it, not like trash, but like a chapter. We put it in the bag for the thrift store that knows how to bless a thing on its way out. We found the sweater my mother knit with a mistake she left in on purpose to keep God from being jealous. We laughed. We cried because bodies are lakes. We put the sweater on a shelf we could reach. We closed the door. Do you hate me? She asked, sudden as a bird. I do not, I said. I hate what you believed. That's lighter to carry and quicker to burn. She sat on the floor like a girl. You don't know what it was like, she said, how he made it sound like love had one door and you were standing in it. I do know, I said softly. I married your father. She looked up then, like she forgot he had a name. He was a man who always took the chair that faced the door and would have preferred a world with no doors. He taught me to cook with the stove off, to set a table for 2.5, to own 2 voices, one for the world and one for home. He taught me what to leave. I left. He taught me who to never look for. I never looked. He died in a city far from mine with a paper cup on his table. I sent flowers that smelled like nothing and cost too much. I cried anyway because I am not a liar to my blood. He was never as hard on me as Kelvin, Zaria said. Your father did his worst in a whisper, I said. Kelvin puts it on a speaker. Both are ruin if you let them run the sound. Do I shame you? She asked. The question was a bruise. I put my hand over it gently. You are my daughter, I said. You are my pride and my ache. You are the sentence I am still writing with my best pen. She cried in the old way then, face open, chest heaving, childhood catching up to time. I held her the way I hold a bowl of batter with one thumb pressed just right so it doesn't spin. When she was done, she laughed with snot and said, I hate when crying makes me pretty. It doesn't, I said. It makes you honest. A month after the trust started doing its work, the school called, not to complain, to invite. Mrs. Imani, the principal said, doing the respectful, cautious thing people do when they're not sure if you want your old name. We're starting a small program for kids who don't love the straight line between bell and bell. We heard about your kitchen. Would you consider hosting a class where they learn to measure something that won't grade them? I said yes because that is the word I keep on the shelf above the stove. We picked Wednesdays, the day my circle starts late, and we called the class Weigh and See. I kept the name simple on purpose. Kids know when you try too hard. The first day they arrived in a clump like pepper. There were 7 of them. One wore a hoodie in July like a shield. One hummed. One would not look at me. Eli came to help, tall and careful. He showed them how to zero a scale. He showed them how to use a bowl that doesn't slide. The humming stopped because measuring is a hum you do with your eyes. There are rules, I said. They are not for me. They are for the cake. A girl with hair her mother couldn't afford to argue with raised one eyebrow like a question mark. Cake has rules? Of course, I said. Everything born of fire does. We baked that day like people who needed to see something rise. We did not talk about behavior plans or detention, or how a boy called Jax hates reading because he reads in a house where the TV shouts. We talked about how cocoa blooms in hot water and what happens when butter and sugar make friends. We learned that if you follow a recipe for the first time, the way a streetlight tells you when to cross, you can look up later and break a rule on purpose. We learned that eggs have moods. At the end, we sat on the porch and ate cake with our hands because forks were a fight we did not need. Jax licked chocolate off his knuckle and said, I don't mess up here. And we all heard what he didn't say. The principal cried in her office later, and I pretended she had a cold, and we scheduled the next 6 weeks like you do when a thing works because you let it. Kelvin did not love that the children loved my house. He tried to hide it in small ways that looked like concern. It's a long drive, he said. The road down to the beach is tight. She's older, he said, as if that were a disease and not a timeline. Zaria listened and then didn't. We are allowed to accept good, she told him softly. You are too. He showed up at Weigh and See once because he wanted to see what had stolen his children's afternoons. He stood in the doorway with his mouth tight. We did not perform for him. We made a mess. He watched a boy who cannot sit still sift flour with the patience of a saint. He watched a girl who shouts in halls, whisper to a pan to please not stick. He watched his son correct my salt with respect. He stood there long enough to unlearn a small thing. That is how men like him change. One brick, not a wall. Between all that, life kept doing what it does when you love it enough to give it a schedule. The mail came. I paid the water. The roof man fixed a thing that wasn't yet broken because he has learned to love prevention. I answered emails from people who read the book and want to send me a story with more capitals than thought. I wrote back when I could. When I couldn't, I lit a candle and said their name out loud in my kitchen like a spell. A spell is only a habit with hope pinned to it. There were days I wanted to smash a plate against a wall for no reason but sound. I didn't. I took a walk and kicked a shell instead. There were nights I wanted to text my daughter a list of everything she had cost me. I didn't. I made a list of everything I had grown. Some days the second list was shorter. It still won. One morning, the ocean was a mirror, and I could see myself in it. I looked different. Not younger, not older, just more mine. There is a way grief can make you look like your mother and your daughter at the same time. I said hello to both of them. We had setbacks. Of course we did. Kelvin lost his temper at a soccer game and barked at a teenager like a dog he doesn't own. Eli stopped coming for 2 weeks without a text, and I almost called him 14 times and didn't, then did. And he answered on the first ring and said he was ashamed because he burnt rice in front of a boy on the line who laughed. And I told him every chef burns rice and every boy laughs. When he is scared, he will burn his own. And how shame is a bully. You can outwalk if you keep your shoes on. Maya decided she wanted to live with me full time because here the spoons feel nicer. And I had to tell her, love isn't a custody plan. And she cried so hard she hiccuped. And I let her cry and didn't turn away. And I cried after she left because grandparents do not get to choose the custody plan, and that is the law written in a book no judge holds. There was one big thing, too. It came the way big things always do, like a letter you don't want and open anyway. A friend from church, yes, I still go sometimes to sit on a wooden bench and tell the truth silently to a ceiling, called and said, "Did you see the council notes?" I had not. I pulled them up on my old laptop that still runs like a man in loafers. There it was, a proposal to re-energize the coastal strip, which is a way of saying, erase what the poor have loved. The plan would close the street my cottage sits on for beautification and reroute traffic through a snarl. It would raise standards for storefronts, which is a way of pricing out the cafe that sells decent coffee at a price that doesn't shame a policeman. It would move the farmers market to a lot 3 streets inland that floods every heavy rain and smells like old metal. The proposal had Kelvin's name on it. Not his alone. He is not the only man who loves an idea that speaks money, but his first and last, clean as a print. I called Zaria. "Did you know?" "I didn't," she said, and you can tell when a woman is telling the truth because it sits clean on her voice. He used to say, re-energize, like it was the medicine for everything. I didn't think it meant this. He thinks it will make the town prettier, I said. People who use that word for places like ours forget that a market with old tarps is a kind of pretty you can only learn by buying cabbage. "I'll talk to him," she said. "You will," I said, "and I will talk to the room." I put on my dark dress. I do not wear it for funerals anymore. I wear it for rooms where someone needs to take me seriously without trying to sell me a pen. I walked into the council chamber and sat in the back until my name was called. My hands did not shake. I have held heavier things. Kelvin looked surprised to see me. That was fair. He was learning that a woman can be grandmother, baker, and storm plan in one body. When it was my turn, I stood and told the room about streets that keep a life. I told them about a market where a boy sells hot sauce from a card table that wobbles. I told them about a cafe where a girl learns that a tip is a sentence that starts with thank you. I told them about a cottage where children come to measure a thing that will not punish them. I did not cry because I didn't want to lose a kind of power. I did not shout because sometimes quiet hits harder. A councilman with a beard he thought was wisdom asked me if I opposed development. I oppose erasing, I said. I like building you can see yourself in. A woman on the panel who wears good shoes for the right reasons asked Kelvin to explain how his plan would protect what matters. He said a sentence that sounded like a brochure, and then 3 more that sounded like he had read the room's air for once. I saw it, the tiny shift. He looked at me and then at Zaria, and then at a boy in a hoodie in the back row who had come because he heard someone was going to move his uncle's truck stand. Control men change slow, but they do change when a door they want swings on a hinge they don't own. The vote went to a special committee, which is sometimes a grave and sometimes a garden. I decided to make it a garden. I brought the committee cake. I brought them photos of the market in the rain when everyone looks like a story. I brought them a tide chart and a map we drew with markers with streets named after spices. I brought Maya's letter that said, "If you move the market, where will the old man with the honey go?" I brought Eli, who stood taller than his fear, and told them he learned to salt in a kitchen that hums because a woman put a scale on a counter and told him to make friends with Grams. The plan changed, not because I baked for the room, because the room remembered it had a heart and a past and a future that deserves to look like the past's child, not its rival. They rerouted the reroute. They kept the market where the ground remembers our feet. They lowered the standards to a word that means, we'd love a new sign, but we still love your old one if it tells the truth. Kelvin took his name off the proposal because he had learned the sting and the balm of a woman telling the truth into a microphone. After the meeting, we stood outside under lights that buzzed like flies. Kelvin came to me like a man walking barefoot over Legos. "You won," he said. "No," I said. "We did." He nodded and looked like he wanted to apologize and say thank you and ask for mercy all at once. He picked one. "Thank you," he said. It didn't itch this time. Progress pays slow, but it pays. Zaria drove me home because my feet were tired and because she wanted an excuse to ask if she could sleep on my couch, like she used to when she pretended to be scared of storms, so she could talk to me at midnight. We made tea. We turned off the big light. She asked me if love ever comes back the same after it breaks. "No," I said. "It comes back better, or it doesn't come back at all. We don't do the same anymore." She breathed out like the room needed it. "Better is scary," she said. "Better is new," I said. "New is not always scary. Sometimes it is just new." We slept like people who worked. In the morning, she straightened the throw with the care of a person paying rent in a house where rent is not money. Time did what it does, made a stack of days look like a life. Maya's letters got longer. She wrote about a boy who trips kids and laughs and how she wants to trip him back. And I wrote back that revenge is a meal that often burns the cook, and she underlined that and wrote cool. She asked if I ever wanted another daughter who didn't break my heart, and I said I have one daughter and she sometimes broke my heart and I sometimes broke hers, and look at us still here stirring. Eli got a stage in a real kitchen that smells like gunpowder and wine. He texted me photos of sauce on a spoon the way boys used to send pictures of their shoes. I bought him a cheap watch and told him to be on time because a kitchen is a clock. He sent me a voicemail once at midnight, just the sound of his breath, and then, "I didn't burn the rice," and I saved it and play it when I need to remember that small wins pay rent too. Kelvin found a job that pays less and gives him back a part of himself he thought he needed to keep in a frame. He started sitting at the back of church, not to be seen, but to be still. He started learning to say the words, "I don't know," without adding, "yet." He still bristles. He still checks the corners of rooms. He still clings. But his grip is not a choke anymore. It is a hold a person can slip out of without breaking skin. And me? I kept my hands in dough and my heart in rooms that feel like rooms. I learned to take pictures badly with my phone of things that don't sit still. Children running, batter falling, light moving across a cutting board. I learned to nap. I learned to let someone else fix the leak. I learned to say no like a thank you. One day I got a letter from a woman in a town 3 states away who read my book during chemotherapy. She wrote, "Your chapter on pie crust made me think about the edges of my life. And I cried real tears and pressed my palm to the page and didn't wipe the wet off until it dried, because I wanted her to know the letter had found a body. Another day, I found a shoebox at my door that wasn't Maya's. I opened it, and inside were receipts and napkins with notes scribbled and a photo of a living room with a plant that looked like it wanted to survive. The note on top said, "I'm leaving him. Thank you for the Wednesdays. Please don't worry if I miss 2. I'll be back with a kettle." Taya put my hand on the box and said, "Go," to a woman who could not hear me and heard me anyway. The tide kept its word. The council kept theirs for once. The market stayed. The cafe got a new sign that made the old sign proud. The boy with the hot sauce got a second table and a partner who laughs with her whole mouth. The honey man started dating a woman who wears hats with flowers on them and calls the bees ladies. We had a storm that scared the dogs and knocked out power on the hill, and the next morning we all boiled water on camp stoves and checked on each other like a town that remembers itself. There were days the old ache knocked. I let it in if it asked politely because I am strong enough to sit with a ghost. I made the ache a cup of tea, and we talked about what we lost and what we found, and then I showed it the door. It left. It always leaves if you do not give it the lease. Near the end of summer, the cafe owner asked if we could host a bake sale for the shelter with the bright door. "We can," I said, "if we don't call it a bake sale. We call it a story table." We set out cakes and pies with little cards that didn't list ingredients. They listed names: Layla's lemon bars, Ruth's First Tuesday chocolate cake, Tilda's new key lime. We put a jar in the middle and wrote, "Pay what you want." This isn't a test. The jar filled. A woman with nails like wet paint put in a stack of 20s, and a girl with a shoelace for a belt put in 8 pennies and a marble. We took both with the same smile. At the end, Maya stood on a chair and read a letter to the room. "Dear people, thank you for being brave with your money. Some money is shy and some money is loud. Today, yours sang. Love. Maya who finishes. What she starts. The room clapped. The ocean clapped back at the windows because it likes to be included. And then, because life loves a circle if you draw it wide enough, the producer called again. "We want a follow-up," he said. "We want to film your kitchen, your Wednesdays, the class, the market, the room where you spoke on the plan. I don't want a circus," I said. "We'll be quiet," he said. "We'll be careful." I called a meeting in my living room because if a thing is going to take your piece, it has to meet your people first. We drank tea. We said yes and no out loud and watched how our mouths looked when they formed the words. We decided yes, if it makes us useful, and no if it makes a spectacle. We wrote it on a card and taped it to the fridge. They came with fewer cameras than they usually do. They took off their shoes. They asked consent like grown-ups. They filmed Eli's hands and Maya's letters and Kelvin standing outside a room, not inside, because that is where he stood in this part of the story. They filmed Zaria and me walking and not saying much because some words are expensive and worth it, and some are cheap and noisy, and we are learning the difference. They filmed the market, not when it was full, but when the vendors were setting up and saying good morning like a spell. They filmed the tide chart and the spice map and the YES tin and the drawer that holds letters and a shell that pokes my thigh when I forget who I am. When it aired, people wrote to say the quiet saved them. That is the best kind of note. You want to know if I gave Zaria money in the end. I will tell you. I didn't give her money. I gave her a plan and a seat and a key to a drawer. Money went to braces and books and preschool lunches and a roof that did not leak on a school night. Money went where money should go, places that do not clap when you walk in. You want to know if I regret not opening my door earlier, if I wish I had sent a text in those years of nothing. I don't. I let them learn what I learned the hard way. A silence can be a boundary, not a knife. I let the ocean keep me company instead of a phone that gives you other people's weather. You want to know if I ever stopped being angry? Sometimes. Not as a gift to anybody who hurt me, as a gift to the parts of me that still want to dance and to the cakes that do not rise if you slam the oven door. One last thing, because you have been with me on this long road with sand in your shoes. On the first day of school, Maya came to my house in a shirt with tiny stars on it and a backpack that didn't chew herself this time. She opened the drawer and took out a letter and put it in her bag. "What's that?" I asked. "It's the story I'm going to tell if I forget who I am," she said. She put her hand on my face, as if memorizing the map, and then ran to the car because children do not know how to leave slowly. I stood in the door and the ocean clapped and the gulls cried like they always do, and I held my life in my hands, a wooden spoon, a clean dish, a breath I didn't have to borrow. Zaria honked the horn the way she used to when she was 16 and impatient for the world, and I laughed and waved her out of the street like you do when you love a person who is learning how to drive again. The day got on with being a day. I baked. I wrote. I answered a message from a woman who wants to set a boundary without losing her house, and I told her you can do both if you do one before the other. I watered the plant that refuses to die and put on a song I like. I wiped the counter the way people in my family have always wiped counters, twice with pride. And when the light went gold and slid across the floor like a blessing, I opened the door because the bell rang, and a neighbor stood there with a pie dish and a story. And we did what we do here, sat, listened, ate, told the truth, and stayed until the quiet said it was time to rest. That is my revenge. That is my peace. That is my life. If this story sat with you, if you tasted the oranges, if you felt the tide hit the rocks inside your chest, stay with us. This is Revenge Stories with Michelle, a home for quiet courage and true endings. Tap like so the next woman finds her way here, subscribe so you don't miss the next long walk, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your voice matters here. Your story matters too.